Hey there, YouTube. Welcome to Big Mike Beard Wisdom. So, we got the stumps out. Now it's time to get ready to do a raised bed. So, I guess this would be called the how not to do a raised bed. Whether you're actually building raised beds to be like really serious about it, or if you're doing it to, just kind of experiment, depends on what kind of wood you want to get. So for me, I just got some pretty cheap pine, or they might be fir. And it's one of those things where I wanted to go with a cheap board. That way it's nice and easy to kind of put everything together, easy on the wallet, and then also if I make mistakes and stuff like that, it's not like I'm out a whole bunch of money. So went to Menards, picked up some 2x6s, and then these are the 6-foot ones. So you can kind of see they don't have a super great edge to them. So I'm gonna have to square them all up just to see if I actually got a full 6 feet out of it. And essentially what I'm thinking is a 3-foot by 6-foot bed over where this particular stump was. So we'll be removing the landscape fabric out. That way there's as much contact with like the actual ground as possible. That way any like worms and stuff can come up through. And then we'll be feeding all the wood and the stumps right back down in there. That way it kind of acts as a Hugelkultur. So which is essentially where you've got decaying matter at the bottom breaking down, returning resources into the soil. So the other thing is that I'm not going to wind up like making this perfectly level. So this is at a pretty good slant right here. So the idea is that I'll build this up 4 levels high. What I'm thinking is that because there's a slant, what will happen is that all the water will kind of pool on this side, but it'll be interesting to see just how much of it pools. And if it's one of those things where if you've got maybe just like the bubble on the level just a little bit to the side, you don't have to worry about it. Or if this particular level is going to be way off and it's going to be one of those things where this one side gets waterlogged and we got issues. And the subjects for the experiment will be all these strawberries. So we picked up some strawberries from Fleet Farm, and it'll be one of those things where that's what's going to be in this garden. So they should be relatively simple. I'm not expecting them to put roots super deep, but at least they should be hopefully tough enough to take whatever stupidity I do with this experiment. And then getting back to the wood, you can kind of see this is just a touch over 72 inches. So just a touch over 6 feet. I'm going to take and clean up this edge here, and then use a square to try and make sure that this edge is nice and square, and go from there. If you're going to just throw one together, you probably don't have to worry about actually, making sure everything's super duper square. You can kind of deal with whatever kind of ends you get. But as you can see, this is now pretty square. So nice even amount up there. The other end's square too. And what this did was this saved me this little bit of being off. You can kind of see super thick down here, kind of skinny there, widens out up there. So kind of a weird cut to it. And then I don't even know if it has maybe a possible vertical shift too, but when you go to screw like the ends on and stuff, that might be a weird thing for you as well. So definitely want to kind of square them up if you're going to do them right. If you're just kind of slapping something together, it's up to you. If you bought better boards, you probably don't have to do this. And then with that trimmed off, you can see we're right at 6 feet. So I'm going to go ahead and get the next one cut to exactly 6 feet. That way they match. So here's the next board. Just checking the bottom part to see how straight that is. You can see it's just a little bit off. So I will be trimming this end too. Oh, being a perfectionist. On a thrown together, not how to do it. Second board's done. Right at 72 inches again. Trimmed off that last little bit so you can see just a little crooked. So stop caring. This is just a thrown together box. So now that we have the 2 sides done, let's talk about the 2 ends. So again, 6-foot board and some change. This end's nice and square. Not the prettiest end. You can kind of see like the saw blade cut in there, but I'm gonna leave that be. And the big reason why is the saw blade itself has what's called a kerf. So it's the amount of material it actually takes out when it does the cutting. So I've got this marked at 36 inches. I'm going to run it right over that line, like so, just a little bit to the side of the line and on top of it. That should take out a little bit of the extra that we have over here. What are you doing to me? What are you doing to me? You were doing so good earlier, and you're running away. And then one thing to always check for are staples, nails, screws. Sometimes trees have bullets in them. So, but you just want to make sure it's not where you're cutting, because that can launch, and who knows where it'll wind up going. This has a nice shield here, so hopefully in case something does launch, you know, it doesn't stick you. And a simple trick to make sure that your boards are exactly the same length is to pretty much flush up one side. That way you've got nice and perfectly lined. And then go ahead and cut down through both boards. That way they're both perfect. So now that you got two boards perfectly the same size, like you're doing some type of finished carpentry, even though you said you were going to leave like the little bit of like a saw blade mark on the other side, you now go ahead and join them together. So this brings us to a good point. Essentially, if you've got exacting dimensions, so you know, hey, I got to fit this in a certain spot and it needs to be exactly this size, you're going to want to take into account where you're going to attach the boards at and adjust your size accordingly. So if you need exactly 3 feet on the end, you want to put your outside boards to the inside. Like that. So that would give you exactly 3 feet. Now, the thing with doing that is that you're not going to have 3 feet on the inside. So if you play, you know, exact rules as far as your plantings go, you're going to lose a little bit of space. But if you're fuzzy logic, you got plenty of room. Now, if you need your exact 3 feet on your planting space, but your physical dimensions can exceed that, then essentially this would be 3 feet, inch and a half to make 3 feet, 3 inches. But just something to consider, just in case you've got space constraints. Then you want to go ahead and screw together. So you can use these deck screws and stuff like that. I went with 3-inch ones, and I ran 2 of them in from the outside here on both sides. So you can see everything's pretty much all together. This is kind of the flattest spot of my garage, but you also kind of want to make sure it's square if you super care that you've got a perfectly square bed. So one of the easiest ways to measure is from the corner to the other corner, and then that corner to this corner. If the measurement's the same, it's square. If it's not square. I can tell you right now, this is not square. So I really don't care that much, even though I was super exact about lengths, because essentially when I set it out there, I don't know what kind of shape it's going to wind up being, which is why I've got these. So these are just kind of cheap pieces of board. So they had like a less than 3-inch, like throwaway kind of $2 boards at Menards. And it was just one of those things where I bought about 6 of them to kind of just have them. And what the plan is that once I get this set out there so it sits somewhat level, I'm going to go ahead and attach these in the corners and then build the rest of this attaching to these. So the next board will go on. I'll screw the next boards into this. That way they're all set up. And then I'll set another one of these on top of it. Next set of boards will screw into them as well. That way I'm more or less building it in place. That way, even if the ground's a little topsy-turvy and I get it to the point that I'm about frustrated trying to level it out, I'm not super concerned about it being perfectly level. I'm not super concerned with it being, you know, perfectly flat. I'm not really super concerned about it being square. Now, if you are, again, this is how not to build it. But if you're building it in a kind of funky spot, you just want to get the stuff in and going, this is kind of the quick and ugly. And then attaching these also acts as a band-aid for situations. So like this one here, you can see the board's actually split. So this being the bottom of the raised bed, I don't want this to go out prematurely. So hopefully having this on the inside, these two will help hold this together, keep it together, maybe it'll last a little bit longer. Otherwise, by creating little triangles with these two, it makes the bed extremely sturdy torsionally. So instead of it being able to wobble back and forth, so really once you got it in place you probably could have knocked it square. Now I've pretty much locked it into the shape that it is currently, which may or may not be square. Now I've got it set in place, and then the next part that you don't want to do is put this in crooked. And by crooked I mean taking a look at the straight lines of the house, and right where this is at, this is set up relatively straight with the side of the house right there, which does make me realize that that sidewalk relief cut is crooked. So now what do you want to be annoyed more by? It being not straight according to the house, or it being straight to the house but not straight to the sidewalk relief cut. Oh boy. But you can definitely see just about the right size to kind of cover up where this big old stump was. So now all I have to do is just pull back the landscape fabric, clear out a bunch of this old mulch. I'll use that to kind of fill in some of these holes. So it won't be the best thing for like sealing to the ground, so I'm sure in time, you know, stuff will leak out the bottom. In which case I'll probably put landscape fabric up against the side of it on the outside and put mulch on the outside. That way it helps keep pressure in too. But this should be not too bad. Just got to fill in there a little bit too. Front section's not bad. But again, once we move the landscape fabric, who knows what it actually looks like underneath. And then once you get in place, you do kind of want to make sure it's level. In this case, I don't really care that much about level. It's part of the experiment. But just setting it in place, you can kind of see there's a fair amount of a gap there. Pretty solid there in the middle and there in the back. So the back's nice and flat, touches in the middle, and then free floats kind of in like this corner area here. And the creepy part is we are kind of sort of level. So it's pretty close. Same thing with this way. We're pretty close there as well. So that's some crazy luck. And of course I'm going to screw it up because I'm going to come in here, dig this down just a little bit. That way I don't have to have this quite as high. And what the plan is that instead of letting it sit directly on the dirt, it's to dig a slight little furrow and put the play sand that I bought underneath it. That way it's sitting on something that hopefully drains better, but inevitably all the soil from inside is going to intermingle in. So is it worth it? I don't know. We'll find out. I got this dug down. You can kind of see some of the impression from the board on top. So I got it back in place, set it back up pretty close to level. So now it's time for some sand. And the idea behind the sand is basically just to aid in like the water going away. So to try and keep the wood that's there dry-ish as much as possible. I mean, inevitably it's going to fill in with more soil and other stuff as the stuff decomposes inside the bed and as the soil in the bed packs down. But, you know, this is just something interesting to try. This is Quikrete premium play sand, so it's pretty cheap. The cool thing is the corner of the bag unfolds. That way you have a nice little spout. And then we'll just put a little bit of sand, you know, maybe like a ½ inch or so along the perimeter of it. Set the box back down, check it for level-ish, and go from there. All right, so sand's in place. You can see just a touch off level. long ways, just a touch off level, but this is grading like down the hill too, so not perfectly level, but it's kind of the experiment I wanted to do. So now we'll just kind of fill in a little bit of the gaps around the wood with some sand, because I still have half a bag. And then we'll get to building this up taller. Just to speed up the process of actually building the box, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a drill bit in my actual drill for drilling out like the holes, pilot drilling and stuff like that. And then this Master Force bit that I bought just for these screws looks like this, fits right in my impact driver, and I'll give that a shot. That way hopefully I just use one tool, drill my holes, go ahead and slap the screws in, and move right along, hopefully quicker than drill one, swap it out, screw one in, swap it out. Everything's all put together. Now we're done. Not quite. So the next thing to kind of consider that you definitely want to do, or you know, not do, is reinforce it. So putting the little things in the corners helps reinforce these areas, but if you've got a long section, you're gonna have possible like hydrostatic pressure, and that's where the weight of all the water and soil builds up and can actually push out the bottom. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw in those boards there, here and here, to try and keep the bottom three at least tied together, maybe all four. But as you can see, still kind of level. Still kind of level, so much for the wrong way to build it. Well, it still might be the wrong way. It's all put together, built using really cheap wood. Definitely don't recommend doing that. Go with a little bit better wood. You know, this construction lumber, not everything's quite straight, not everything's quite right, so a little bit weird. But for me, this gets me started. And definitely do stuff as far as reinforcing it, because you definitely want to have it reinforced. As far as putting it somewhere level, highly recommend doing that. If you've got like a little bit of a hill kind of thing for drainage from your house and stuff, not a great spot for it, because you're going to lose maybe about half your board back there and then have a full board up here. So, you know, you're going to lose some of it for drop. But I do recommend building a kind of a big one, because this will be really easy just to reach in 10 stuff to it, nice and easy, as opposed to being all the way down the ground. And then from what I was reading, a lot of stuff definitely said to use either like sand or gravel or something like that down at the base in order to kind of give it better drainage. That way it lasts a little bit longer. For me, I wasn't able to find the boards that I wanted exactly, but I knew I wanted to get this started. So I went with something kind of cheap, and at least it gets me started. It's not quite the size I wanted, but that's okay. So this being a 3 foot by 6 foot, well, 3 foot 3 inches bed, it's small enough that if I like this and I think this is a good spot for it, I can easily do a 4 foot by 8 foot bed around it. So as the boards begin to decay and stuff like that, you know, there might be enough room that I can just build around it, cut this down, yank the old nasty boards out, let the dirt just fill into the new area, and I'll be all good to go. So if you're thinking about doing a raised garden bed, I'd definitely recommend doing at least something. That way you have an idea of, hey, this is what I want to do, or wow, this is a pain in the butt and I don't want to do it like that. This was nice because essentially this is a starter bed, and it's built relatively cheaply. So if it winds up not being the best thing in the world, I'm cool with it, because I didn't spend too much money on it. Definitely spent enough labor. Whew. So hope you guys enjoyed the video. Feel free to like, subscribe, and I'll check you next time. Not really looking forward to throwing the big old logs inside now. Woo, Hugelkultur.